to start this stream the same way I start most streams. That is by saying, I hope this works. I'm Jean-Marc Giffen. I am one of the engine programmers for Aeons Engine and with Handelabra more generally. And I'll also be doing the music for Aeons Engine later. And I've done music for some past projects like Sentinels of the Multiverse and Bottom of the Ninth. So for those of you who don't know, Aeons Engine is our latest digital tabletop gaming expedition. It's on Kickstarter right now, and it's at 17,920 out of the 30,000 goal, which is really good because it just went live on Monday. So hopefully we will reach the goal soon, and we can reach some more stretch goals from there. So I will be talking about the engine development, and this will be sort of a three-part thing. So first I'll be talking about engine development, and then I will write the code for a simple card, and then I will pass it off to John, and he will be talking about the UI programming and integration. So that's making it look good, because it doesn't really look that good what I do. And then alongside him will be Jennifer, who does all our graphics things, and she does make things look good. So they'll be working together to make the new spell look interesting, and I'll just make it so it does the thing it's supposed to do. I'm just gonna pop out this thing here, if I can remember. Pop out, there we go. There. Now we don't have to do the window and window thing every time I'd like to see the chat. I usually have two monitors, but right now I just have the one, so that's why everything's on the screen at once. But hopefully that's fine. I'll just alt-tab around a bit. Alright, so let's get going. So I have a little presentation here just to help get things started. So informally we call this the Aeons Engine because the pun there is too good to resist. So primarily to do this development, and by the way, if anyone has seen any of the dev streams for Sentinels of the Multiverse or One Deck Dungeon, this will all seem pretty familiar to you. So hopefully you don't fall asleep, but for the rest of you though, this might be quite new. So the technologies that we're using and that we've gotten used to in our regular company process is Unity, and for Aeons Engine we're using Unity 2018. Unity is a 3D game engine and supports a lot of systems, which is part of the reason we use it. It's easy to export to all the different systems we want to go to without much configuration. That's pretty standard these days, but it was a pretty big deal when it first came out. We use Visual Studio as our IDE. I prefer Xamarin, but Xamarin has basically become Visual Studio, so it is what it is. And we program primarily in C#, which is a general purpose object-oriented programming language. I won't really go into what that means because this isn't a tutorial on programming. It's just more specific to what we do for Aeons Engine. We use JSON to store some data. And by the way, I'll be showing you examples of all this. I'm just doing an overview for now. We use JSON for storing data primarily about the cards in the game in Aeons Engine. And we use NUnit to unit test our code to make sure that stuff works. And our system architecture is the model view controller. So I'll just go over what that means a little bit. So we have two big chunks here. One includes the model and the controller. And this is the rules engine, DLL. And the model is basically anything that needs to be saved. It's the low-end stuff like mages and the nemesis and the decks and the cards. And then the controller has more logic in it. So this is mostly data and this is mostly logic. So like the game rules, how the cards work, the special nemesis instructions and all that. And the model doesn't know anything about the controller. It's just the controller that has access to the model. So the controller can get data from the model, and it can also update data in the model to be saved for later. And that's one of the main things the controller does, is just keep all the data to be what it's supposed to be. And then we have views. And we actually use 3 different views for both Sentinels and Aeons Engine. Unity is our primary one. That's the one that you see when you're playing the demo and the final product. The unit tests, they just sort of run against this to make sure that the rules are correct. And then there's the console, and that's like text console. And that's basically like an old school thing, like DOS or, the Unix command prompt. Basically lets you play the game with nothing fancy added to it. And then between the view and the DLL, the view can get data, and it asks the controller to give that data in case it needs to manipulate it somehow before sending it back. The controller sends over game actions as they happen. So it's like, oh, we're shuffling cards now, we're moving this, we're going to the next turn. So it just tells the view that, and the view's like, okay, I'll update accordingly. And then the view tells the engine about any user interactions along the way. So oh, the player wants to cast a spell. So it tells the rules engine that the player wants to cast a spell, and then the rules engine does what it does, which is usually cast a spell. But if there's some reason that they can't, or they chose an invalid target or whatnot, then it can tell the view that, and the view can decide what to do about it. I'll just take a look, read the chat here. Let's see. Mic is off. Okay. I'm glad everyone else was hearing me, because otherwise I'd have to start the whole thing all over. How happy are you that this game doesn't have a guys like character program? I mean, I'm pretty sure that the majority of our games won't have a guys like character. But yeah, so Sentinels is definitely the most complicated game we've done so far, and Guys is the most complicated character we've done in a game so far. So yeah, I would say a huge portion of our programming time since he's been released, has been dedicated to maintenance of him. So I'm glad that there is no guys in this game. No offense, guys. All right. Let's see. Yeah. So in the model, it's actually divided into sublayers, again, which we'll go over a little bit. There's the JSON definition file, and that describes what you see when you look at the physical psychological components. The physical components. So like the title of the card, the card's text. In this case, it's Ether cost. And I can show you what one of those looks like right now. So it looks kind of like this. So, here's one for Jade. So the identifier of the card is Jade. The title is Jade. The identifier can be whatever we want it to be. We have a policy of just renaming it after the title in most cases. The type, a Jade is a gem. It costs 2. It provides 2 ether, because all gems provide ether of some sort. We just have a little helper for that. The effect, just gain 2 ether. The short body, this is like the icons that you see in the game. So these are kind of code. I don't even know most of these because I'm not really responsible for coming up with those. That's more on the graphics side. So I just follow whatever convention I see. And then flavor body, that's like the flavor text at the bottom, which is really small and hard to read on a real card, at least for me. So that's what the JSON definition is. The next layer up from that is the C# definition objects. And basically those just turn the JSON objects into C# objects, because you can't actually interact with this. This is just text at this point. So we actually need to create definition objects that convert that information. Let's see, I can just definitions. Here we go. This one here. So like the player card type, so that would convert gem to an actual enum of right here. So now we actually have solid enums to work with. The cost of the card, that turns it into an int. So now we can interact with that. The amount of ether that it provides, the amount of damage it deals in the case of a spell, stuff like that. So now these are all objects that we can ask about, manipulate, whatever we need to do. And then the layer above that is the C# model object. And so that stores a definition, as well as any information that has to be part of a saved game file. So some examples are mages or nemesis or minion or gravehold's current life value. So if you load a game, like they should be at the same life as they were before. And the location of each card. When you load a game, all the cards should be where they were last time. And it also has to know things that are less obvious, like whether or not a diamond has been played this turn. Because if you look at, or a diamond cluster rather, it says, if this is the second time you have played a diamond cluster this turn, gain 2 additional ether, right? So if you load the game, it needs to still remember whether or not you've played the diamond. Because if you play a second one, then you should get more ether for that. So I'll just right. So serialized means it's saved. I guess there's nothing special there, so I'll go into card. Serialized means it's like a saved piece of information that will be loaded later. And so you can see here, like, The card knows where it is. It knows who owns it. Turn taker is a generic term for a mage or a nemesis. Let's see. This is the deck that the card belongs to, which is usually whoever owns it. This is the discard that it belongs to. An instance identifier, this means if there's multiple copies of the same card, I can still distinguish between them. So, you'll have Diamond Cluster 0, Diamond Cluster 1, Diamond Cluster 2, and so on. And then a card type. So is it a player card, is it an nemesis card, or a turn order card? Because those are handled drastically differently. So yeah, pretty basic. Again, the model is just used so that we can get a bunch of data and, set it, basically. Change it or read it. So models aren't terribly complicated. There are a lot of typing just to get set up, but they're not terribly complicated. Let's see. Do you have an explicit flag for diamond, or do you just keep a history and check it? Yeah. I wrote this to sort of give an example, but we have a thing called a journal, and I'll load that up here since you asked about it. And basically, a journal just keeps a recorded journal entry, we call them. Like anytime a card is played, it just makes a journal entry called a play card journal entry. And it says this player played this card, or this turn taker rather played this card. Each time you focus a breach, this breach was focused from this rotation to this rotation. And so from there we can just look up the history of those particular events. We only add them as we need them. So the reason that this one even exists in the first place is we want to be able to look in the past to see if there are any, if there were any diamond clusters that have been played. So if we look in the code for diamond cluster, has card been played this turn? So it looks for a diamond cluster, and if you go into the code for that, it just looks in the journal. It says find the play card journal entries where the turn index is the same, meaning it was done this turn, and that it has the same identifier. So if the count's greater than 1 or 0, then it has been played this turn, and it can go from there. Somebody may have said my brain is wonky from work. Is there a composition plan for the dev stream schedule as much? I know you did one such, and it may be too early for Aeons Engine. Yeah, so we've been talking about doing a music stream for Aeons Engine during the Kickstarter, but my family is expecting our another child this month. So whether or not that will actually be possible is up in the air, because I will be taking at least 1, if not 2 weeks off for that reason. So I guess we'll see. Oh, thank you. Thanks for the congratulations. Yeah, we're really excited to have our family grow even more. I'm interested in knowing what you are composing for this game. Is it mage music or nemesis music or something else? I'm happy to let you know what our discussions have been so far. We haven't actually started anything, so it's not set in stone. But it'll probably be based on the nemesis that you're fighting, and it won't necessarily be like, the nemesis's theme song. So it won't be like, here's Rageborn's theme, blah, 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 or whatever. It would be like, what is the feeling you should get when you're fighting this particular villain? And so it represents more the battle situation against that particular nemesis, as opposed to being their theme. And because, you're always fighting in Gravehold, we couldn't make the environment a consideration. So if Rageborn did have a theme, it goes ba ba pa, as Takewalker has said. All right. Understood that this is provisional ideas for the music. Okay, yeah. Again, I haven't actually started any of the music for this yet. The music in the demo is just royalty-free stuff that we put in there that has the right feeling for it, but isn't distinct enough that that it will sort of become its own theme, and then people will notice it's gone later. I mean, you might notice it's gone, but I don't think it's huge. For royalty free, it sounds pretty good. Yeah, that was, a lot of royalty free music is pretty generic, and I think that's on purpose because, if you're selling it without knowing what it's going to be used for, you have to go a little bit more on the generic side. But I listened through a bunch of them, and I found that one, and I was like, okay, yeah, this sort of fits that middle ground of being appropriate and having a little bit of character, but not being too specific. So, all right. So I'll continue. Let's see. I'll go back. All right. So that's the model layer. So the layer on top of the model, as we see here, the one that talks to the model is the controller. This is sort of like the big deal when it comes to game engine rules. So first of all, there's controller objects for just about every model object. So they live on top of the model objects and control their behavior. And so, for example, a card controller object contains a card model object and the logic for that particular card. So you'll see here, like the diamond cluster that I went to. The diamond cluster is a gem card controller, and then this is basically saying normally you gain 2 ether, but if it's the second time you've played one this turn, then you gain an additional, so we add an additional 2, and then we say, okay, the owner mage controller, that is the one who owns this diamond cluster, because they have to own it before they can play it, gains this amount of ether, which has been pre-calculated by that point. And then the game controller is the big cheese. So all objects in the game belong to this master game controller object, and the game controller enforces the rules of the game. So all the other objects must go through the game controller to make sure they're not breaking any rules. So even if, like, a card says, hey, I do this, but there's another card over there that says I prevent that from happening, the card by itself doesn't know that, but it can tell the game controller, hey, I'm trying to do this, and then the game controller will say, tell the other card, hey, he's trying to do that. And then that other card will say, well, you can't, and then it'll cancel the action or whatever. But basically the game controller kind of keeps things in check, because otherwise you start to get spaghetti code where, one card has to know about all the other ones, and then that gets really confusing really quickly. And is generally considered hacky programming. That's fine for a game jam, but pretty bad for robust systems. And then finally, on top of that, in the engine, we have 2 view layers. We have the unit tests. So these are over here, and these basically just, do a specific thing. So they start a new game. They go to the main go to Brahma's main phase and play the diamond cluster. And we assert that she just has 2 ether at that point because it was the first one she played. And then we put it in hand and play that card immediately again. And then when she does, she gets 2 ether and another 2 for playing 2. So we assert that she has 4 ether total. So these are just, I mean, these are like super helpery. You know, there's sort of a lot going on under the hood for each of these, but the goal is to make it so that the tests are easy to write. You know, like we could write it out every line of everything of like, enter this phase, go here, do this, use this thing. But generally, the easier we make it on ourselves, the faster we can develop. So it's worth putting in the extra time to make good helpers, because it cuts down time the more we make. So that's the unit test, and then there's the text console. We have one of these for Sentinels. We didn't make one for Bottom of the Ninth or One Deck Dungeon, but we are making one for Aeon's End, and that's sort of the alpha level of the Kickstarter. And it allows us to interactively play and test out the game of Aeon's End with any new features or content without the necessary graphic assets or UI support or anything. So you basically just like make a new thing, and most of the time it'll just work. It might throw an exception if you're doing something wonky or whatever, but generally we consider this to be our alpha testing. And I can show you that right here. So it always asks you if you want to continue your previous session. If you have one, so we'll just say no. You can either play the demo game or a custom game. Eventually this might just end up being custom game, but for now, like, most of what's available is the demo content, so I just made that sort of a convenient thing to get you started. Whoa, sorry. Hit the microphone stand. So yeah, it just gives you a little intro here, how fast you want to run it. I'll do medium, and then so you can see like, oh, here's the setup of the game. Here's who gets to go next. It's Rageborn, and then it stops at every phase so that you can make sure you can read what's going on. Oops. So Rageborn has no start of turn effects. He has no cards in play to resolve, and then he plays the Agony Field. In the future, this will actually like show you the card when it's played, but right now it just assumes you know what it is because we're the only ones using it at this point. But that'll be changing soon. End of turn, okay, and then Jean goes next. Start of turn, what would you like to do? And then it's like, okay, you can choose to play a card or prep a spell. So let's say I hit play a card. I choose to play the Moonstone Shard, and that lets Jean gain 1 ether, regular ether, and then 1 that can only be spent on gems. And then again, I can play prep, and now this new one here, gain a card because I now have enough to buy a jade. So I'll just prep a spell first. So I select one of my sparks, doesn't matter which one. I can choose which breach to prep it to. I'll just do it to the first one. So now that's in there. And then I can type view Geon just to see some sort of a summary of those things going on. So the ether I have, the prepped spark, and then I can gain a card. The only one I can gain is the jade, so it automatically spends the 2 ether, and I gain the jade, and it goes to my discard. So you know, this is like, you know, if I had just added a new card. We also have a debug system we call it cheating because, you know, in old games they had like little cheat codes, and so it's a bit of a nod to that. So cheat grab, you know, let's say I wanted planar insight, I could do that. Oh look, now planar insight's in my hand. I didn't pay for it or anything, you know, but this is just for testing again. And we deliberately have you put the word cheat, so it's like this is not something you normally supposed to be doing, but you can do it. So now I can prep that to breach 2, and now planar insight is in breach 2. Yeah, so anyway, and now you'll see a new option has appeared: discard a power agony field. So I'm going to read agony field to know what's going on there. So to discard, destroy a card in hand that costs 2 ether or more. So you'll notice that wasn't there before, and that's because I didn't have a card in my hand that was 2 ether or more. But now that oh, that shouldn't be there actually. So when I put planar insight in there, that came in. But now that I prepped it, it should go away. But it's not, so I guess that's a bug. But I guess it just didn't know to update that or something. But anyway, so you get the gist of how this thing works, I think, maybe. So I'm going to read some comments here just in case there's any more questions. Let's see. There are too many Jean-Marcs. Oh no, actually I don't know very many. Apparently Jean-Marc is an old man's name in Montreal. Well, I'll be an old man someday, I suppose. Let's see. We cloned. Oh, you've cloned me. Oh, okay. That's why there's so many of me. All right. Okay, here this looks like a question. I know multiplayer is a potential future addition. Do you consider how the user-client interaction will be implemented when developing the application architecture at this phase, or is that something completely put off for consideration until later? Yeah, so most of the multiplayer elements are on the UI side. That is the user interface side. Because that's the one that talks to Steam and it talks to the network and all that other stuff. In terms of the engine, we don't need to worry about too much about it, because the engine doesn't really care who or what is playing it. The only thing that we do right from the start is a question of who is making these decisions. You know, a decision comes up like play a card, discard a power. You know, like who is making these decisions? When you're just playing solo, it doesn't matter. You can just say, well, the player is whoever has the game in front of them is making the decisions. So in this case, we don't actually show any of that information because you're the only one. But when it comes to multiplayer, it does matter who's making those decisions, because it has to know who to send it to. So under the hood, we kind of have everything keep track of who's responsible for which decision. And if multiple people are, you know, then if it's in a multiplayer game, let's say one player is playing multiple mages, and those 2 mages make a decision, well then it just has to ask that one person. But if there's one player playing one mage and one player playing the other mage, and there's a decision they both have to make together, well then, you know, they have to deal with that somehow, like maybe voting or whatever. So so that's the main consideration we need to do in the engine from the start, to make it so that when online multiplayer is a thing, we don't have to worry about that aspect of it. Hope that answers your question. All right, so I've got about 15 minutes left or so. Not hard and fast time by any means, but I was thinking we could just implement a card here just so you can see all the systems in place. So I have this card, Ignite, and it's a pretty simple card. It's a spell card, and when you cast it, it deals 2 damage, and then any ally gains 1 charge. So the first thing I'll do here is go into the player card list, and trying to keep it alphabetical, so I'll put it right after Jade. And I'll just copy and paste that so I already have some of the typing done for me. And I'll just start putting some things in. So the again, the identifier and the title are usually the same. If there's spaces in the title, we take them out. But other than that, it's usually the same. The type is a spell. The cost, let's take a look. It's 4. So we'll put 4 here. Ether, so the Jade is a gem, so it gives you some ether. But most spell cards, maybe all of them, deal damage. So instead we'll just change this to damage, and it's 2, so that we can leave that as is. And then for the effect, deal 2 damage. And then there's another line here. Any ally gains 1 charge. Okay. And then, so this is where the icon identifiers come in. So I usually just look at some other ones. Let's see, damage 3. Okay, so I'll just pull that one down. Damage 2. And then charge. Yeah, charge ally. That's what I thought. Okay. There. And then, right, so the flavor text at the bottom. Yeah, it's really hard to read. Okay, so there's 2 different types of flavor text. There's one where it's just like, just flat out text, and then there's some that are quotes. So the quotes have a little bit more to them. So I'll just copy that from there. And so this is, oh, that's so hard to read. Okay, I'm just going to pull up a physical card in front of me so I can see what's going on. Okay, so that's Kadir, the Breach Mage Delver. Okay. Kadir. And she is saying, we are but one flickering flame against unimaginable dark. And the word dark there is on a new line, so that just indicates to the view. It's like, hey, put a new space there, okay? And that's about it for the definition. Pretty straightforward, especially compared to One Deck Dungeon, where we kind of did some fancier things. But for Aeons Engine, that's about as much as we need. So the next thing we do then is we create a card controller. We don't need to worry about the definition objects because those are made automatically, and we don't need to worry about the model object because those are made automatically. So the only thing we can go all the way up to the controller level and just make a new card controller and call it Ignite Card Controller. 2 L's. And from there I can just copy an existing spell. I'll just take Buried Light. Can probably make a template for this kind of thing, but I haven't done that yet. Some habits die hard, right? Okay. And yeah, it's a spell. So here's what happens with a spell. Ignite is a subclass of spell, and if we go into spell, whenever it's cast, here's what happens. So first, it gets the breach that it's in, and then it checks, does this spell have a damage value, which it does, we just put it here, or does the breach itself adjust damage? Because in Aeon's End, if you have a spell in a breach, and for whatever reason that spell is not going to deal damage, like it's 0 or whatever, because of a situation, but that damage is increased, then it deals damage anyway. So even if the card doesn't normally deal damage, it will anyway in this case. So if it has this value, then go ahead and deal damage to the target specified. I won't get into exactly how all that comes in. That might be more on John's side. But basically, we already have the mage casting the spell and the target by the point this is called. And finally, after casting that spell, if the game isn't over, because, dealing the final damage would end the game, then do the rest of the casting. And that's where it jumps into the specific card we're talking about. And the next thing it does is any ally gains 1 charge. So the first thing we do here is not capital. We need to select the ally. So we have select turn taker. That means select either a mage or a nemesis, but we can limit that to just the allies. So the choices for the turn taker are the mage that owns this ignite card's allies. So now we'll only be selecting from the allies. Now in the case of the demo, there's only 2 mages, so it'll automatically select the other mage in this case. And we also select or give a reason for what excuse me, why this is happening, so that the view knows how to display it. And in this case, it's to gain charges. The decision makers, this is who's deciding which one gains a charge, and that should be the one using the spell. And we have this little property, this decision makers, that kind of has a bit of smarts in it. It's like that kind of knows who to use. Is optional. No, it doesn't say you may. They may gain a charge. It says they must. And then the amount of charges is 1. And then Visual Studio wants to put it on a new line for me. That's fine. And then, so you might be wondering, like, what is this? If you're used to programming, you've probably never seen this before, and that's fair. The reason that this is here is because we're running the engine in 2 different contexts. One is the unit tests and the console, and then the other one's Unity. Unity uses coroutines in a way that the others don't. And so basically we have to handle 2 different, I guess, architectures. And so in order to do that, we've come up with, well, if we take a method and assign it to a value, a variable, and then call these two different things, one just calling it straight out and the other one yield returning, then this will make the unit tests and the console happy, and this one will make Unity happy. So it's a little wonky, and the biggest downside to it is that then your return value is this enumerator, so you actually have to put
get your return values from a list, like something you pass as a parameter, which some programming languages do just that all the time anyway. So I guess it's weird for C#, I should say. So anyway, we pass those in. So now we've selected an ally, and then we just do some basic error checking here. Make sure that an ally or a turn taker was selected. And we get the one that was selected. And again, this is sort of like extra work that you wouldn't have to do if it wasn't for this wonky thing, but it is what it is, and it's not a big deal. So so then this is where they actually gain the charge. So adjust charges, so the ally gains 1 charge. Right? What's it? Oh, right. I have to convert that to a mage, because only mages can gain charges. All right, and that's about all I need to do there. Everything else is already taken by the engine we've set up. So the last thing to do would be to make a unit test for this. So I'll just check the chat quickly, and then so many coroutines. Yes, there are lots of coroutines in Unity. I mean, we're used to doing this from Sentinels, and then we didn't do it for Bottom of the Ninth or One Deck Dungeon, but those presented their own challenges, so we decided to go back to using them here. All right. Let's see. Right here. Ignite. So let's start a new game. We have to make sure that in the supply pile we have the new Ignite card. Excuse me. So now we're sure that this, because otherwise it won't be in there, it won't be in the game, and then when you try to use it, it'll just throw an error, because it's like, I don't know, like, what is this? So, Ignite, deal 2 damage, any ally gains the charge. And again, because there's only two mages, it'll automatically go to the other one. So go to main and prep, and then cast a spell. We have helpers for everything. So we'll just say it's Jean. That's my favorite testing person. Ignite. We have to choose a target for Jean's Rage. So it'll be Rageborn, because Rageborn's Rage from Jean or something. And yeah, sure, why not? It'll go in breach number 1. And so first we store Rageborn's life beforehand, and then we check Rageborn's life afterwards, and it should have gone down by 2. And also beforehand, we'll check both Jean and Brahma's charges, and they should both be 0, but then after this goes off, Brahma should gain 1 automatically, because it's any ally, and an ally is any mage except yourself, and Brahma's the only one. Let's give that a shot. Oh, I ran the wrong test. I ran the one for Jade. Okay, it passed. So we can look at the output of that if we want to too. Again, nothing pretty. But the main main stuff is there. So let's see. So we go to Geon's main phase here, main state. We subdivide the phases into states in the engine because some things need to happen before others. But when you're playing the game, you don't actually notice that happening. So all these activations come in. These are all the possibilities of what you can do. We choose to prep Ignite to Geon's breach 1. It moves to the breach, and it's considered to be prepped. And then we continue on from there, and we go all the way to Geon's casting phase. Use Cast Ignite, and Geon deals Rageborn 2 damage. So Rageborn is now at 68 life. And then Brahma gained a charged. And then Ignite moved to Geon's discard, and that spell is considered to be cast. So that works. Now, I'm not sure whether or not it's going to work properly in the console because we've just been using the demo stuff up till now. So this may or may not work, but I'm going to go ahead and try it anyway. So I just got to close the console so it can build it. All right. So let's see. No, play a custom game. These are the other mages I've been working on. Let's see. We'll go with Mist and Adelheim. And then, okay, Ignite shows up there. That's good. So we make sure that one's in there, and it doesn't matter what the rest are. I'll probably add a function for just randomizing, but for now this is fine. Make it go fast. All right. So you'll see it just rush through all that other stuff, but really I just want to get to testing it out. Okay, so let's see, help. Forget how to look at the supply. Maybe we don't have that in there yet. We need to add that. Okay. So for now, I'll just do a cheat grab, Ignite. So now I have an Ignite in my hand. I'll prep it to breach 1. Okay, now it's in Mist's breach 1. And when it comes to our casting phase again, I should be able to cast it, assuming everything works. All right, so Rageborn is mad. I'll just get him to attack Adelheim there. All right, so now we're back at Mist's casting phase. Select your spell to cast. You can skip it because you don't need to cast it on an open breach. So we'll go ahead and Ignite, and then we can select targets. So right now Rageborn is a target, but also Banesire is a minion that presumably Rageborn put out at some point. I wasn't really, that's the disadvantage of all that text going by really quickly, is you don't see that stuff happening, but this is just for testing purposes. Yeah, let's go ahead and deal it to Banesire. Ignite is cast. Then the spell is discarded. Mist deals Banesire 2 damage. They're now at 4 life. Adelheim gain 1 charge. Ignite move to Mist discard. And there we go. I mean, that's pretty much pretty much the card in action. And that, once I commit that pretty much concludes the work that I would have to do on this. So I'll just go ahead and do that. So this is just sort of a summary of all the changes I've made, if you're not used to source control. And basically it encapsulates all those changes so we can look at them, undo them, whatever. It just makes it a lot easier than just a bunch of files flying around with no control over them. So implemented ignite on stream with test. And commit that and push that. And that's about as much as I would do on the engine side for that. And so then it would just sort of be up to John and Jennifer to make it look nice and work in the interface. So that is what we're going to move on to next. So I am going to check if there's any questions. And if there are, I will answer them. And if there's not, then I will let John take it over. There's a crazy echo. I'm not really sure why there's a crazy echo. Nothing has changed on my end, so. I have 2 audio sources. Well, I am using the only microphone I have, so I'm not sure. I did set the one that I have to be mono. I don't know if that's doing something or not. It shouldn't, but who knows. All right. Oh, awesome stream. Thanks. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I really appreciate the look under the hood. Yeah, we're pretty transparent about things. We like to help people. There's no need to be a black box, really. Just upgraded to the architect pledge level, and I'm looking forward to more interactions with Dev. We are looking forward to interacting with you. Thank you for doing that. All right, so I will now pass it on to John. So there might be a little bit of a delay, just me signing out and him signing in. But stay tuned for part 2. I don't know why I did it ghost-like, but anyway.
Hello out there in Streamland. Welcome to the Hall of Mirrors. Ooh, haha, it's spooky. Or something. Let me know how the level is with my voice. I'm going to turn my voice so I'm not in the red as much. And the music that's going on in the background, if you prefer that to be different. And yes, the Twitch chat thing does this thing where it goes real big. How about that? I have an echo image. And also the stream stopped. Cool. Let me know how the levels are and if you're happy with that. My internet connection here is not the fastest, but hopefully it will get the job done. Thanks again, Jean-Marc, for an excellent low-level engine stream. And I will be talking about the UI. The mic could come down a bit more. All right. How about now? Minus 3.6 dB. Is that the sweet spot? Just a little bit in the yellow, but not all the time. Maybe a little lower. 3.9. 3.9. Come on. There we go. Sweet. All right. Let us get to it. So, yeah, I have the chat on my iPad here, so I don't need to have it on the screen all the time. Let's have a look at that Kickstarter. Whoa, visit the Kickstarter. Let's see how we're doing. We have made it to 18,000, which is 60%. So awesome. Thanks everyone for pledging, and let's keep it rolling to get into those stretch goals as fast as possible, including one deck dungeon and maybe something else. We'll just have to see. Maybe you should watch the video and maybe you'll get a really good hint about what that might be. But yeah, let's go ahead and grab Jean-Marc's code. If I pop into my Git client here, I can see we have a new commit coming down the pipe. Jean-Marc implemented Ignite on the stream. I'll take it. And I have a little script that I can run to build the engine so that I don't have to even open the project. Saves me some time when things are iterating real fast. Whoa, that's a lot of text. Takewalker, you should watch the video. It's real fun. Jeremy's got some cool special effects at the end too, so he and Chris have spent a lot of time on the video. You should enjoy it. Cool, so that is the engine updated, so let's pop over to Unity. So most of the time we're going to be in here doing Unity stuff. We've used Unity for all of our games, and it really helps to make the game, I can't talk. It makes it really easy to bring the game to different platforms and not have to worry about a lot of the low-level 3D, 2D graphic stuff. It takes care of a lot of the tricky stuff for you. So let's pop in and see what's going on in the game. So our main game view here, as you can see, is similar to what you've seen in the web demo. If you haven't played it, go check out the Kickstarter and you can play the demo for free. So up here we have the scene view. This is like the sort of almost not really code, but like you can get into stuff and mess around with it. And this game view is showing you what's happening, like what's actually going to look like on screen based on your 3D cameras, because you might have multiple cameras doing stuff. So what I'm going to do is just play this and see what's happening. Come on, let's go. All right, so I've actually put in, I'm going to try to reduce the size of this on the left here, maybe. I can't really. So I got a console here, over here, giving me information. But you can see this is all the same kind of stuff that you're used to seeing from the demo. I've actually got 3 mages going here to demonstrate some of the stuff with Ignite that's coming up. And you can, drag cards to play them, or click to play them as well. That works too. And buy stuff from the supply. If there's amber, it can go to your deck if you want. We'll do that. So yeah, so that's really cool. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to show you Ignite, and based on, I'm going to assume that Jean-Marc made it work properly, and we'll see how that works, and then we'll get into like how is it going to actually, how is it working in the UI. Takewalker suggests get Kevin to play the demo and see if he can beat Rageborn and crash it. I'm not sure if the math doesn't work out. You don't have enough time. So here we have a debug settings thing that lets us set up the game to begin with, so that we can do what we want. So I'm just going to replace Wildfire Whip with Ignite, and I'm going to make it so that my first mage goes twice, and we'll see what happens. I'll put it into a prep spell afterwards, but I want to see it in supply as well. We'll see if it works. Well, I see something there, and we didn't get an error, so that's good. Let's zoom this up here. So we can see there's Ignite with 4 cost, 2 damage, give an ally a charge. Very similar to Mage's Talisman here. It's gain 1 charge and ally gains 1 charge, so there's the same icon for that. And if we right-click that, we can see we have Ignite with the text here, and that lovely flavor text as well. So you can see we don't have an image there. That is something Jennifer is going to get into the game afterwards. So look forward to seeing that nice image as well as some animations. But if we actually, Gian doesn't have enough ether to buy it, but I could fix that, or I'm just gonna go ahead and put it on as a prepped spell. So let's put it here as a prepped spell, and then when we run, it's gonna be automatically, every mage is actually gonna get it as a prepped spell because that's simple. So yeah, so it's this lovely white box in the first breach, and that's because we don't have an image yet, but I can still cast it when we get to the casting phase. And we don't have an animation, so it just like pops up a warning, still does the damage, and carries on. At least it should. Maybe it doesn't carry on. This might be something. Oh well. The game should carry on after casting a spell, and there aren't any. But that is not. It might be that this code is not returning. No, it's returning. It's just the engine is not carrying on after Ignite. Oh, because, oh right, this is why. So one of the things that we are going to be working on is making it more obvious when you need more things to do. It's not a crash take walker. It's that I forgot there's another part of Ignite is to do that. So we have to give an ally a charge, which I forgot about. So let's do the casting again. Sorry, it's a little slow because of the streaming. So here, one thing we need to do is make it more clear, like the game is asking you to do something, and that's why these buttons are popped up, and I totally missed it. And so that's something that, similar to One Deck Dungeon, we have different things that like make it clear what you're doing. Eriska and the flavor text didn't put a line break where Jean-Marc put one in the JSON. That is because the line breaks don't necessarily work when you have dynamic text. So we actually clear at the line breaks so that it can fit the text in the UI differently. So here we can choose one of your allies to gain a charge. Either Brahma or Mist can gain the charge. Let's let Brahma gain the charge for the heals. And then it carries on. And so only because I didn't remember how Ignite worked. But as I said, we'll make that more obvious that like, hey, you should click these buttons and not think that the game froze, like I just did. So cool. So that's sort of demonstrating that Ignite worked as Jean-Marc programmed it, and that looks good. So if you watched our previous dev streams about One Deck Dungeon and Bottom of the Ninth, some of this will be familiar in terms of activations and actions I'll be going through. But if you haven't, it'll be all brand new. So in the game view here, this is sort of our main user interface, and it's all organized using the Unity UI system. And you can see when I like click on stuff, it sort of highlights the different things, and you can actually change stuff while the game is playing, or ahead of time or whatnot. So it's really nice to be able to mess around with stuff. And we also, so in terms of the interaction with the game engine, that goes through Game View Controller, which is analogous to the game controller. It's sort of the next level up. All the stuff that goes to and from the engine, from the view, is going to get routed through the game controller at some point. So let's go ahead and look in there. So let's sort of see what happens when we cast Ignite. So when we cast Ignite, we are going to get an activation view on that. So let's run it here and see what's happening. You can see lots of stuff happening in the log. And this is all actions. At this point, it's all actions coming from the engine saying, hey, the turn order card got flipped. Hey, we're moving states to the next thing, and the UI is updating itself in response to that. When we get to something that you have to do, we have activations that Jean-Marc talked about, where that's something you can do, whether it's a button you can press or something you can drag and drop or that sort of thing. So we're in the casting state, and we get a cast spell activation. We also got a continue activation, which we can use to skip if we decide not to cast the spell. So let's pop into that, and I'm going to stop the player here because that will be too slow. So yeah, so if we go right back into the game view controller, we can sort of take the full thing. So the first thing that comes in is, there's a couple of ways that activations come in. One of them is through an action. One of them is through a direct event. But basically, it'll come in some way where the engine says, hey, here's an activation, you should handle it. We put it in a list to make sure we can update things if we need to later. And then we use our activation view factory to find a specific class that's going to handle that. You're not hearing a bird, you're hearing a football referee whistle because there is a match going on across the street. And I'm sure that is a tone that is easy to pick up on a microphone. So someone hit the ball out of bounds and that sort of thing. So we find an activation view for the cast spell activation, which happens to be this, the cast spell activation view. Evil Ace Monkey asks, football or actual football? Well, I'm in Bogota, so what do you think? It's football, not hand egg. So when this activation view wants to activate, this is where it's going to make it possible for you to actually cast a spell. So the first thing we do is we know that there's going to be a card view associated with that spell somewhere in the UI. And so we call a function to find that. And if we find it, we are going to go ahead and tell it to get ready with this information. And so if we don't find it, then there's a problem and we need to figure that out. So we log a warning about that. So let's have a look at what this does. If we're activating this for a cast spell, we hold on to some of the information we're passed, and then we just update the interactions. And all this update interactions is doing is saying, should we be able to click on it? So we highlight it. If we go back and put another spell on, you can see the highlight a little better. So let's also put on a spark, and we can see that. So that update interactions is going to be turning on the highlight, so you can see, these are the things that you can use. Yeah, so here you can see these glowing lines around, and we can actually click on them in the scene view to have a look. This is, that's the wrong breach. I don't want to always fix that one up. Let's pop in. So here's the Spark card view, and we've got a highlight on there. These highlight images are now on and showing. It's not showing up in this for some reason because of depth, I guess. Oh wait, no, that's someone else's breach view. I don't know why when I clicked on the one it didn't go to it. Sometimes it does that. That's why that one is not the right thing. Is this the right thing? No. Let's go to the active mage. I don't know why it wouldn't show that. Sometimes Unity is a little funny about that. So now we're in the right thing. Now you can see this highlight is animating its color because it's enabled. So it's got that activation on it. And so if we go back to the code, another thing that is happening that isn't sort of all the time, but we have, so this is clicked as an event handler for when you click on it, cast spell doesn't worry about clicking, but it does worry about dragging. So when we start dragging on the object, we look to see, do we have any activation that allows dragging? These ones are actually activations that have to do with actually dragging the card around the screen. So playing a card or that sort of thing. What we're looking for is the cast spell activation is handled separately because it sort of has to create that targeting arrow and draw that. And so when that's happening, we actually have a line renderer object that's going to draw a line on the screen and all that stuff. So you can see there's lots that goes into even a simple interaction like this. We also have to keep track of when the mouse is being held down and dragged. We need to update where that arrow is, update the angle of it, draw a line to it, and then when we finish, we actually say, all right, let's finish the we have to, so this is unhighlighting, but we also have to go ahead and actually cast a spell, and that gets actually done in a different place. So this is all stuff that's concerned with the card view that is being dragged, but the thing that gets dropped on is what knows about, like, hey, that cast spell got dropped on me, I should, we should target this thing. Because with a spell, we have a target all the time. So let's look at that in the UI here again, then we'll jump into the code. If I'm going too fast, let me know, and I can slow down a little bit. See what time it is. Yeah, we're doing all right. So, back to the casting phase. So if we look here, I'm gonna open this up a little bit. I'm just gonna do it on the Spark because it looks cooler than the Ignite, which doesn't look like anything. So we go to the card view, and this is the targeting image. Yeah, so you can see, I'll try to make this a little bigger so we can see this more. Yeah, so when I start dragging, you can see the line renderer becomes active, the targeting image becomes active, and you can see on the right-hand side in the inspector that its values are changing, and we're updating that all the time. Then you can see other things are lit up on the screen while I'm dragging it. So what's up with that? When I start dragging, we also highlight anything that you can drop it onto. And so that's any damaged target view, which is going to be right now the Nemesis. It could be a minion as well. And we can actually probably go ahead and just like put a minion into play so you can see that. Let's put a haze spewer on, and then we can see another target. There's that good old haze spewer, spewing haze. So we'll get to the casting phase again. I'm just gonna check continue game so it'll be faster next time we restart. So now when I start dragging, you can see the haze spewer also starts lighting up, and when I go over top, that his HP disappearing is just a developer thing, it's not a big problem. But you can see when I go over top, it'll show me how much hit points they'll have left after I do that, and that's another thing. So let's have a look at what's happening in that target view when we're actually going over it. If we look at the Nemesis panel, and that main image there, it's got a script on it called damage target view. And so it's looking for things being dragged over top of it. And you can see, so it's implementing drop handler, pointer enter handler, pointer exit handler, which are more things that have to do with drag and drop. So the first thing I was talking about here, so let me just pause Unity so that it's not using up too much CPU. When the pointer enters it, so this is happening all the time, not just like whenever something's being dragged. So we need to like check to see, is something being dragged? So we have this function to call to say, hey, is there a player card view being dragged over top of me? So that's the first thing, is there actually one there? And if so, does it have a cast spell activation? Because that's the only thing this component really cares about, is cast spells being dragged onto it. So if if it's there and that is an active activation, we change the highlight to show the red one, and we show how much to give a little damage preview as well. And then similarly, when the pointer leaves, we need to like reset our display as well. And then if we actually drop the card view onto it, then we need to go ahead and say, so this is where we proceed with the activation. So we tell the view, hey, you should call your completion handler on that cast spell and give it the target that you actually dropped it on, because that's information that we need to give to that activation before it can go ahead. And so we end up back here. So that completion handler is this little block that we passed way back, 20 minutes ago in that activate for cast spell. We passed this function that says whenever you're ready to go, when the user has dropped it on, call this with the target that they picked. And so for that activation, we give it the information about the target, and then we proceed with the activation, which is going to tell the engine, go ahead and do stuff with that. So what it does at that point is the engine gets the information, and it goes ahead and processes whatever it needs to do. So it'll cause the damage to get dealt, it'll cause the other effects of the spell to happen. And that could have more things that happen, right? Maybe we damage a minion that deals enough damage to make it destroyed, so it has to be destroyed. So that's another action that happens that tells the view. And since we're using coroutines, this can all sort of happen in a flow of control. If it needs to be interrupted by a decision from the player, it's not a problem with the flow control. Bishop 83 has a question about how many turns did the original Sentinels demo have? I believe it had 2 rounds. 2 or 3 rounds. Cool. And then we clean up here and clear the highlights away. So that's pretty much how a spell gets cast through the code. We can also we may as well have a look at what happens. So that's the interaction, right? That's the activation. What happens when it actually gets cast, right? Like we tell the engine we want to cast this spell at this target, and then it does stuff. So let's see what happens. So we've already got the activation. We went through that. Let's take the spark, and we're gonna select the minion, say. So I drop it on the minion, and a bunch of stuff is gonna happen here. We get the damage animation and stuff, which is nice. So we get a warning here because we put the minion in play in a way that the engine didn't expect with the debug thing. But what we proceed with the activation, and then I actually have quite a lot of logging here, but what's going to happen is we're going to get a cast spell action, which is then going to do other things. So let's look at our game actions. I think cast spell action does part of it. So when cast spell action happens, we play a sound effect, and we bring up that first part of the animation. So let's pull that back up again and look at the animation, because there's 2 parts to it, and they need to go off separately. So remember, we'll hit the minion here. So the first thing that happens is when I let go, that cast spell action is going to happen, and I'll pause it here. So we get that first animation of the spell going towards it, and if we look in this code here on the cast spell action, it's looking to find out, is there a target for the spell? Let's find the card view belongs to the spell that's being cast. Find the target view. If we found both of those things and we have an effect for it, we're going to create that particle effect and say you're going to the target and let it animate and then get rid of it. So it's sort of a multi-step process here to do that animation. So you can see this is still part of that cast spell action. So we haven't gotten to any damage yet. We haven't gotten to any other effects. When we actually, so we finish that animation, and then you can see here we're waiting for that duration. And so the engine is not doing any more stuff right now. The engine is waiting for the UI to say, keep going. And so after we get through this, we get to the deal damage. And that's another action that comes in. And when that comes in, we react to that, we do other things. So the deal damage action could be things like damaging Gravehold, damaging a mage, and so we have different cases here. The case we're looking at here is either the Nemesis controller or just a minion, a card controller. And so we play sound effects for that. We also assign a target view, and so we assign that target view in both the Nemesis and the minion, so that later we can just have this code in here once that says, okay, similarly to the previous thing, let's find a damage effect in the spell library for that spell, and let's animate it. And then we'll return back to the engine after the animation is complete. And so we have that cool effect there. And then you can see it animates really fast, but another part of casting a spell is that the spell goes away. The spell goes to your discard. So if I let the game go here, I can click on the discard and see that Spark has returned to the discard. And that's a move card action, which is another action. So it really is set up so that everything that happens is compartmentalized into the different things that need to happen. So the move card action is a little more complicated because there's different parts of the screen that things move to and from and to, and they might need to have a different animation. And so it handles all those different cases in here for that. So that's kind of how we connect up, what's going on in the engine with what the UI needs to do. So I think that's probably going to be it. It's about 2:30, which is about time for Jennifer to take over. So I guess I can take any questions if anyone has any before wrapping up. We've got Ignite working, and so it's ready for Jennifer to set up a nice image for it from the card art we have from Aeon's End, as well as damage animation to make it look super cool. Seamus Butler has been trying, not sure if they can deal enough damage to beat the game, but they haven't tried to kill Gravehold or both characters for loose. That's the only thing you might be able to... I don't know if you can have Gravehold get killed, but you might be able to have a mage get knocked out, which would end the demo as well. Cool. All right, so I'm not sure if Jennifer is in the chat to let me know that she is ready or not, but I can message her on Slack to find out. And I'll wait for any questions. I'll go ahead and post the linko in the chat for the Kickstarter. Check out the Kickstarter. It is going well. Let's have a look. Have we gotten any more pledges during the stream? Maybe some. The page has been open, so I think we got a few pledges during the stream. Evil Dice Monkey wants to know, is this usually how you divide up your workload, everyone working on coding one card at various stages? I mean, it's not like we do a live stream for every card, but pretty much like David and Jean-Marc work on the programming in the engine side, and they'll implement different cards and different actions and activations that are necessary for those cards, and then they'll commit that work as they do it, and then on the UI side, we'll need to build the UI support for those different things. So it's definitely stages of things where it needs to get done in the low level first, and then I need to build it, support for it in the UI to have an interaction. Oh yeah, Jennifer will need to pull it. I'll need to commit my changes. I didn't actually make any changes except the DLL, but I'll do that. And then finally, Jennifer will do the visual. So the sort of process is being represented here quite accurately, I think, in terms of what needs to get done first. But it's not typically one card at a time. It'll be various different groups of things, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna switch over to this repository. Yeah, I don't think I actually changed the game view. Thinks I did, but all I did was update the DLL. And then Jennifer should be able to see it. And Jennifer is sending me a message. Good. Cool. So Jennifer, I think you should be good to go if you pull the DLL here. Once that's, I'm just going to make sure that is pushed up. And then you should be able to put Ignite into your debug settings and see it, as well as in the card tester and stuff like that. So let's go back to here. Looks like that's all the questions. Yeah, so I'm going to sign off here, and Jennifer will be on shortly. Thanks for watching.
Press play, and I'm just waiting to make sure that I'm showing up on Twitch and that everybody can hear me. And let's take a quick look at the Kickstarter and see how that's doing. And it looks like we're around 18,000 out of our goal. Oh, and it just went up a little bit. All right, I got a hi Jen in the chat, so that means that I am live. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do is put in the card art for Ignite, because as you saw on John's stream right now, it's just showing up blank. So, oops, let me close that. All right. So in case you haven't seen it, this is the card art for Ignite. And I will have that up in Photoshop. And I have a file I put together where I have all the player card art cropped that's used in the game. So I'll go ahead and put that image into the right file. And make sure that we get it all in there. Audio is really quiet. Okay, I will try to talk a little louder. I'm not sure why it would be quiet. So that looks about right for the crop. Okay, so I think my audio is okay then, hopefully. And I'm gonna actually make Photoshop so I can see the chat on my screen at the same time, if it is cooperative. Alright, so we have, there is our image for Ignite. So where this is going to go, I'll pop into Unity here, is we have atlases for all sorts of different things. So the player card art folder has images for all the different cards, and they're saved out at 1000 by 833 right now. So, and this Photoshop file right now is 2520 by 2100. So we have to make sure we save them out at the correct resolution. And it looks like I've been making them JPEGs, so I will make this a JPEG as well. So so I'll make this a high quality JPEG. We'll save it out at 1000 by 833. And we'll make sure we put it into that atlas, deep within the Aeons Engine folder. Player card art, and this is Ignite. Alright, so putting it in that folder, what does that do? It makes it show up in Unity, number one. And there's all sorts of different settings that can be changed on it, but that's not relevant right now because it's going into an atlas. So, and I will show you what that looks like. So there's the player card art atlas, and I will go ahead and pack that up. And what putting the cards into an atlas does is it reduces the number of draw calls when the game is in play mode, which means that, you know, for example, on this first page here, you see there's 4 images. So those 4 images will be treated as one image, which will reduce the amount of resources required to, you know, access the images. And, you know, it's for 4 images, it's not a big deal, but when you put in the, you know, hundreds of images that are in a game, it makes a big difference in terms of performance. So it looks like we've got 4 pages in this atlas right now. And there is the image for Ignite there. So now when I press play and I right click on it, there is the card art in the game. And so that is step 1. Now you also might notice that Ignite has been prepped but is a white square right now. So we need to get the prep spell crop version of Ignite put into the project. So for that, and that is going to go into a different atlas, the prep spell art atlas, where we have the other images, buried light, essence theft, and so forth. So we'll go back into Photoshop, and I have this player spell art prep file where I have I'm going to read what Migrant P wrote in the chat. It is relevant. The atlas also helps reduce the size of the game by combining smaller images into one image that can be compressed better for technical reasons. All right. Going for mask, and it's neat because I can move the image wherever I want it, and it'll only show up in that masked area. So the first thing we need to do is move the add the Ignite image into that file. And I will go ahead and save that. And I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this mask. Oops, I broke that a little bit. Let's close that. So the first thing I'll do is I'll shrink this down a little bit so it actually shows up inside of the circle. And it's not all going to fit in a circle, so we have to decide what part of this image we want to show. And I have been making cropped images mostly like the, if you look at the other ones, oops, I will close. We don't need to see my error I was getting earlier. You know, the image of the character casting the spell, or whatever looks like it'll work well in a circle in the image. So for this one, I think it makes sense to focus on the mage as she is casting a spell. So I will go ahead and create a clipping mask so we can see how that looks cropped out. It looks pretty good. So I might, so, you know, so here it's kind of like a judgment call. Do I want to zoom in closer on her or zoom out more? And, you know, it's still early in development. If we change our minds on how we want it to be, we can change it. But for now, I think that looks about right. Well, I will turn off the guide so we can see. I think it looks about right for the moment. And I'll go ahead and export that into Unity. And since it's the same size, I can just do a quick export if I had it set to PNG. And I can say quick export as PNG. And let's see. goes deep into the Aeons End folder. And this is for the Prep Spell Art Atlas. And it is Ignite. So now it shows up here, and she's actually looking a little bit small now that I see her in Unity, but let's see how she looks in play. So yeah, I think she's looking a little bit tiny in there compared to the other ones, so I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Though I do like the idea of her hand showing with the glow coming out. But let's see if this is better. And it's going to pack up that Sprite Atlas. And I think that's looking about right. And right now, if I cast it, it doesn't do anything because there's no special effect. But before I show you how I build the special effect for it, I'm going to go ahead and show you what the Prepped Spell Art Atlas looks like. And this one actually, because they're smaller images, they all fit on one page. It's a smaller page. Big sound effect. I'm not sure, because I didn't hear a sound effect, so I'm not sure what caused that. I'm sorry. I apologize if there was a loud, horrible sound effect. Oh, it was from, yeah, okay, it was when I was saving it, sorry. So that is where we're at. Yeah, it was a Windows UI thing. It was like an error telling me that I was saving over another file. So if we look at my config settings, right now I have, some other spells prepped. So I'm gonna, in case there's anyone watching who hasn't played the demo, I'm gonna show you what some of the damage effects look like in the game. So there's like, they cast a spell, and then like there's an explosion at the end to show where the damage is going. And they're all a little bit different. And I think for this image, she's got like glowing blue flames and stuff coming out, with like with trails after it. So I was kind of thinking that it was similar to the Spectral Echo effect that I've put in, except in blue. With the green trails, instead of the green trails, I would put in some blue trails. So let's try that. So I have a testing scene. Do I want to save changes? I didn't make any changes, so no. And I have all the different damage effects in here. So, for example, if I want to see what the spark damage looks like in the scene, press play and it explodes on this blank small card in the middle. So Spectral Echo is the one I was thinking looked the most like what I was envisioning for this effect, except, with different colors and maybe some other tweaks to it. And these are prefabs, which means that like if you they can be used repeatedly in the game over and over again. And so like if you change the prefab, then it changes changes the effect in any place that it would be used. But I mean, right now it's just being used in the game view when a spell is cast. But so what I'm going to do is, actually I'm going to duplicate the cast and the damage for Spectral Echo. And these, yes. And I will rename them to be Ignite Cast and Ignite Damage. And then I will make them their own prefabs, so when I change them, it doesn't affect the spectral damage one. For example, so like right now the particle system is green, I could say make it red and apply it. And you know, obviously we don't want it to be red, but what that'll do is, oh, that was the wrong one. These are all doing different things. I want it to be the big one that goes all over the place, just to show you how it works. Okay, so that puts a big red blob in the middle. And so even though it was a duplicate of the Spectral Echo one, I can play the Spectral Echo one and it'll still be exactly the same as it was. Okay. Now, right now, these effects are playing for 1 second, and they're just playing one time, which is not real helpful for testing. So what I'm going to do is set them all to loop. The distort we don't need to worry about looping right now. But these we want to loop. So, so let's take a look at the first particle system here, which is actually just like a pulsing light kind of thing going on, which I think will work well, but we don't want it to be red. We want it to be, you know, more of a blue. And I think the particular material it's using is kind of got a greenish tinge, so we can try one with a bluish tinge. There's all these different particle effects in here. That one's not bad, because if we look at the art, it's kind of, it's got like the kind of a greenish blue going to like a very slightly purpley blue. So I think, you know, that it's not a bad like overlay color, and we can see how it looks with the other colors going on. And then this effect with like the streaky things coming out, we want that to be very blue. Maybe like a cyan kind of blue in there, or even white. Maybe white. I think that works better. So that's a nice combination. And then for these huge ones, we want those to be blue for sure. And probably not the same material that this is using, because this looks like it's, yeah, it's using like an orangey red one. And I don't know why these aren't showing up right on here, but they're not. So there's like a darker blue. That one's kind of subtle. Let me try this one. It's like a, it's very blue, so we probably don't want too much of a color tint on it, because it's already pretty blue. But I don't know, let's see what this looks like in play with all three effects going on. Is anyone else having a problem with the stream? I saw Take Walker in the chat said it keeps pausing, but okay. It's okay. Alright. let me know if anyone else is having issues with it. There's a lot of stuff going on the computer, so it may... What if it had a swirl to it like a spiral? That's an excellent suggestion. Why don't we try that? I believe that is... So we could... Let's save this like it is right now. Let's look at some of the other... I'm going to go through and look at the other damage effects that I've made so far. So you can see some of the effects that are already being used. So that's Spark. That's Essence Theft. And that has some swirliness happening. Not exactly what we want for this one, but... Cleaner Insight is pretty tame compared to some of the other ones. I probably need to add to that. That was Buried Light. Spectral Echo we have already looked at. Wildfire Whip. Alright, so then Ignite right now looks like this. I think we could do some interesting there's a Distort, which is not looping. Let's see what happens if we have that looping on it. It's not really showing up. I know that there's some good distorts in some of the effects. Rotation over a lifetime. Yeah, or it just goes in one direction. Let's see what kind of effect that has. Doesn't really seem to be having any effect when I press play, and I'm not sure why. Make sure it's set to be in the front. It is set to be in the front. Sometimes things need to be moved forward in 3D. I don't know, it's strange that the Distort is not really showing up at the moment. I know there's a Distort on some of the other ones that definitely shows up. I don't know, but we can make a brand new particle system that we add to it. I'll show you what that looks like. So I think I'll leave those effects for the moment. I think this one is looking a little bit larger than we want it. And possibly a little bit too opaque. So I'll bump this down. Be a little bit more subtle. Alright, so I'm going to make a brand new particle system in this prefab, and I'll say effects particle system. And that is what the default particle system looks like in Unity. Not exactly what we're looking for. So we want to change it to a circle. And looks like it's putting the circle right around our placeholder small card, and it's shooting those particles all over the place. Yeah, and there are lots of them. Let's make the lifetime a lot shorter too. And just so I don't forget, I will move the sorting layer to the front and set the layer to UI. Yeah, these are all on UI. All right. Let's get something that looks a little bit more exciting for the actual particles, and we'll make them slightly bigger. So let's see what kind of particles we have in here. Well, that's kind of interesting. I don't know if it's quite right for this. But and yeah, I'm having some kind of display issue that they're not showing up right in here. In the select material, that's interesting. And there's our default particle. And the answer, I got a question in the chat, is each spell going to have its own individual effect? And the answer is yes. They each have a separate effect. So this might be interesting if we have these spinning around. Maybe not shooting off like they are. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think as we add more spells, you know, they might some of them may end up being similar, but we'll see. I mean, yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, they're each going to have their own separate effect. They'll be visually distinct in the game. And we also want this to be set to duration of 1, and we want it to fade out because these are only going to be on the screen for 1 second. So we want to make sure that they fade out after a second. So we have a smooth end to the spell effect. So let's make these rotate and see what happens. That's kind of interesting. I'm going to move a little bit faster. We can start them at different places. And as I look at it, I'm not sure this is exactly the right image I want. It's called Trail 4 Mobile. Let's try ooh, that's interesting. Some of these are not particle effects that are popping up in here, but that's kind of neat. Yeah, it does kind of look like blades right now. We want it to look more like energy. We could have it moving out a little bit as it goes. Like swirling bits of energy shooting off. We can make the color a little bit bluer in some places. Let's see how it looks with all the other effects we put in here. Wow, there's a lot of things swirling around, aren't there? Maybe it's a little bit too much. Let's take a look at them and one by one. I'm not sure that one's really working as well as I liked. It's starting to get there. Not sure about the spinning. Maybe if they were not all going the same direction, or maybe if they were a different material altogether. That's interesting. That's kind of cool, actually. That wasn't what I was thinking initially for this one, but it's kind of neat. They're a little bit too bright. Let's make them move a little bit slower. And tone them down a little bit. Well, that's kind of cool. So that's worth testing out in the game. I'll probably make some more adjustments to it, but you can try it out. So I will go ahead and apply that to the prefab. And before we switch over to the game view, let's take a look at the cast, because right now it's probably still looking pretty green because I just duplicated a green one. So go ahead and make this blue. Oops. Instead of green. And we may need to adjust it more, but it's looking close. We can see how it looks in context in the game view. So I'm gonna save my damage effects testing because I added some new effects in here. And I'll switch back over to the game view scene. And I'm going to want to try this more than once, so I'll put Ignite in a few spots. I'll put it in all of them. We can play Ignite 4 times. How about that? What? Could not find spell card Ignite. I know why, because there's only one copy of it in my hand. So, let's alright, so we'll have 2 of them. That'll be good. Alright, so let's see what happens if we use a spell on Rageborn. Nothing, and do you know why? Because I missed a step. There is a library called the Spell Library, and I'm going to lock that so I can drag the prefabs into it. So, in order for the spell to show up in the game, it needs to be in this library so the code knows where to pull it from. So here are my prefabs, so I'm going to add a new entry for Ignite. So we're going to add the Ignite cast, and that's the trail that shoots it towards the target. And then the damage is the explosion at the end when it hits the target. Okay. That doesn't need to be locked anymore. And I can go ahead and play it, and now it should show up. And just to review, this card will deal 2 damage, and any ally will gain a charge. So, okay. It's I think it's going in the right direction. It's not quite where it needs to be, but I think the trail's a little bit too, well, okay. I think it needs a little bit more when it is exploding, but I think it's getting in the right direction. I also, it's also not ending quite as smoothly as it will, because it's still set to loop all of the particles, but small player card image, yes. Do we need a small player card image? Probably. Let us put it in our hand. Initial hand. I put 2 copies of Ignite in my hand, which means I'll need a third one in my in here. All right. So let's see. It looks like Migrant P is correct that we are missing a small card image for Ignite. So let's go ahead and add that before we forget. So that would be in the small card art folder for player cards. And we have these images are 180 by 90. And I forgot to have that Photoshop file open ahead of time, so let's go find it. Let's see, small card art. You know what? I don't see it, but that's okay. We can make it. We can make our own. So I will go ahead and duplicate Ignite into a new file. All right, and we need the image to be 180 by 90. Well, what size is it right now? It is a lot bigger than that. So let's make this canvas 1800 by 900. So it'll be the same proportion. All right. So for the small card art, we want to fit as much of the image as we can into the cropped format, because as you can see, these, you know, they have the most important parts of the card in there, or important parts of the image in the crop. Although that one might need some of them, well, maybe not. Maybe they need adjusting, but we can make this one crop to show as much of, I think that gets the bulk of it in. You can actually even zoom in a bit more, because these are going to be showing up small. So I think that's pretty good. And it's 10 times the size that it needs to be, so that's easy to fix. Alright, so now we have our image, and we're going to put it, instead of in player card art, we're going to put it in small card, player card, and this is Ignite. Now I'll go ahead and show you what that atlas looks like. It's the small player card art. So it's like small card art atlas, and doesn't have the Ignite image in it yet. So I'll press pack preview and it will appear right there. As I realize that I'm not capturing my cursor and acting like you can see it, but it's there. So I'll press play. And there it is. Looks like you can see the monster, but not so much of the mage, but that's okay. But if we wanted to, we could adjust that. duplicate that layer. So you know what? Let's zoom in more on her, or maybe not zoom in more, but just shift it over a little bit. I don't want to, yeah, say maybe like that. Just maybe so she shows up a little bit. And I'll export it again. And it looks like it is getting close to my stopping time. So I will just make a few more adjustments. I will make a few adjustments to the damage prefab so it'll transition nicely. And if anybody's any questions for me, please drop them in the chat and I will try to answer them. Yeah, I think this crop works a little bit better because you can see the mage a little bit. And to update the prefab for the spell, because right now they're all set to loop, I will just go in and uncheck the loop button. And let's see. That was the new one I made. I just want to make sure yep, that looks right. And then on the parent object, it has a destroy delay of one second, which I think is probably right. What that does is it allows the particle effects and animations to play for an extra second even as the game has moved on, so that way you don't have to, the player doesn't have to be delayed waiting for it to go on before they can keep playing, but you still get the cool effect showing up. So let's just take a look at how this is looking. So if we play it on Rageborn, yeah. Well, that was weird. It had a little bit of, seemed like it had a little bit of residue from the one effect. I might adjust that. Let's see how it's looking when it's playing on the minion card. I have this minion card in play right now. Yeah, it looks like it's got some residual. So we want to make that, that was the last particle effect we added in. So it looks like right now it's lasting for a second and lifetime is a second. And it is fading out over lifetime, but it's still going. So we're going to, let's make that duration 0.5 and see if that makes it a little bit smoother. Okay, well, there was a few little bursts at the end, but that is kind of cool, actually. Yeah. And it's still set to looping, which is why it's doing that. I just realized. So that doesn't need to be shorter. It just needs to not loop. Okay, so that is looking pretty smooth now. And I will play it once with the audio not muted. Alright, and that is how we make a damage effect in the UI. Oh, is it really loud? I thought I turned my volume down. I felt pretty low, but apparently I woke up the chat. So, all right. Well, now that everyone's awake, if you have any questions, I'll stick around in the chat for a bit. But I think that about concludes my stream. And thank you for joining me. I'll take another look at the Kickstarter while I'm here, and it looks like I'll refresh the page. And so the audio capture is super loud. It was nice and dramatic, though. Okay. Well, thank you for thank you for joining me, and John and Jean-Marc as well. And if you haven't tried out the demo yet, there's a link to it on the Kickstarter. If you scroll down on the page, you can play play it right in your web browser. And thank you once again, and I'm going to sign off. And have a great day, everybody.